David Reeves adjusted his tie for the third time in as many minutes. The fabric felt strange against his skin after months of wearing casual clothes aboard the transport ship. Through the transparent wall of the preparation chamber, he could see the enormous assembly hall stretching out like a cathedral built for giants. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the tiered seats, their forms ranging from the familiar to the utterly alien. Dr. Amy Walsh touched his shoulder. "You've got this. We've prepared for every question they might ask." David nodded but kept his eyes on the hall. 50 years. That's how long humanity had waited for this moment. 50 years since the Galactic Assembly made first contact and placed Earth under observation. 50 years of proving they weren't just another violent species that would threaten the peace of civilized space. Commander Nash stood near the doorway, his military bearing evident despite the diplomatic uniform. 5 minutes, sir. The Chancellor is taking his seat now." The High Chancellor of the Assembly was a towering reptilian being named Brentok. His scales gleamed like polished bronze under the hall's lights, and his eyes held the weight of 3 centuries of leadership. David had studied everything available about him. The Chancellor was fair but traditional. He valued order, stability, and adherence to established protocols. A soft chime indicated it was time. David picked up the data tablet containing Earth's application and walked through the doorway. The noise of thousands of conversations washed over him like a physical wave. He made his way to the presentation platform at the center of the hall, his team following close behind. The platform rose slowly, lifting them above the crowd until they stood at eye level with the Chancellor's seat. David could see the council members arranged in a semicircle. Each represented a different founding species of the Assembly. Their expressions ranged from curious to bored to openly skeptical. "The Assembly recognizes Earth's representative," Brentok's voice boomed through the chamber. The translation implant behind David's ear converted the words instantly. "You may present your species' application for membership." David took a breath and began. "Honorable Chancellor, esteemed council members, representatives of the Assembly, I come before you today on behalf of humanity and our home world of Earth. We seek membership in this great organization not as supplicants, but as partners ready to contribute to the peace and prosperity of our shared galaxy." He activated the display. Holographic images appeared around the platform, showing Earth in all its blue and green beauty. "Our world has taught us many lessons. We have known war, yes. We have made mistakes, but we have also learned from those mistakes. In the past 2 centuries, we have achieved global cooperation, eliminated poverty within our population, and developed sustainable technologies that work in harmony with our planet's ecosystem." A flutter of wings drew his attention. One of the council members, an avian being with brilliant crimson and gold plumage, leaned forward. His name was Quindle, ambassador from the Avix Confederation. David had read about him too, brilliant, influential, and known for his sharp tongue. "Forgive me," Quindle's voice carried easily through the hall. "But did you say 2 centuries? Your species has only been unified for 200 of your years." "That's correct, Ambassador." Quindle's beak opened in what the briefing materials had described as their version of a smile. "The youngest species currently in the Assembly achieved global unity 4,000 years before developing space flight. Most took even longer. You present your brief period of cooperation as an achievement." David kept his voice steady. "I present it as evidence of our capacity for growth and change." "Growth and change," Quindle repeated. He looked at the other council members. "Did you all review the human historical database as I did? The wars, the genocides, they nearly destroyed themselves with atomic weapons barely a century ago. 100 years, and they believe they have changed their fundamental nature." Murmurs rippled through the Assembly. David felt Amy tense beside him. "Ambassador, every species has a complicated history. We don't claim to be perfect. We claim to be ready." "Ready?" Quindle stood now, his wings spreading slightly. "You have barely left your own solar system. You have no advanced defensive capabilities. Your medical technology is primitive. Your longest-lived citizens barely reach 120 years. You are children playing at being adults." More voices joined in. David could hear laughter starting to spread through the hall, not everywhere, but enough to make his face burn. A council member from the insected hive clans chittered something that the translator rendered as, "Perhaps they should return when they have something meaningful to offer." Brentok raised one clawed hand and the noise diminished slightly, but David could see it in the Chancellor's eyes. He wasn't going to intervene. He was going to let this play out. Quindle walked along his tier, addressing the crowd now rather than David. "They come before us with their primitive ships and basic technology, asking to sit as equals among species that have mastered the fabric of space itself. They want to vote on matters affecting trillions of beings when they can barely manage their single world. It would be amusing if it weren't such a waste of the Assembly's time." The laughter was open now, hundreds of beings joining in, not malicious, David realized, worse than that. Dismissive. They weren't laughing at him the way you'd laugh at an enemy. They were laughing at him the way you'd laugh at a child who didn't understand how foolish they sounded. Commander Nash moved closer. "Sir, we should." "No," David's voice was quiet but firm. He turned back to Quindle. "Ambassador, if I might continue the presentation." "There's no need." Brentok's voice cut through the noise. The Chancellor looked tired suddenly. "The Council has heard enough to make a preliminary determination. Earth's application for membership is denied. You may reapply in 500 standard years, at which time we hope your species will have matured sufficiently." 500 years. David felt the number like a punch to the gut. Everyone he knew would be dead. Their grandchildren's grandchildren would be dead. "This session is concluded," Brentok continued. "The applicant may depart at their convenience." The platform began to lower. Through the noise of the dispersing crowd, David could hear Quindle saying something to another council member. Both of them were laughing. Amy's hand found his arm. "David, I'm sorry." He nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. They had failed. After 50 years of observation, after all the preparation, all the hope, they had failed. And worse, they had been mocked for even trying. Commander Nash guided them toward the exit. David looked back once at the massive hall, at the thousands of species who had just dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Then the alarm started. The sound cut through every conversation in the assembly hall like a blade. High-pitched and pulsing, the emergency klaxons made the air itself vibrate. David froze on the exit ramp as red warning lights began flashing along every wall and corridor. Around them, the orderly departure of thousands of beings dissolved into confusion. Voices rose in dozens of languages, creating a wall of sound that even the translation implants struggled to process. Amy grabbed David's arm to keep from being knocked aside by a group of crystalline beings rushing past. "Attention all assembly personnel and visitors." The announcement came in multiple languages simultaneously, creating an eerie echo effect. "This is an emergency alert. Multiple critical systems failures detected in the central core. All beings proceed to designated evacuation points. This is not a drill." Commander Nash immediately pulled out his portable scanner. His fingers moved across the display with practiced speed. "Sir, their environmental systems are cascading. I'm reading pressure drops in 7 sectors, temperature spikes in 4 more, and the gravity generators are fluctuating." David looked up at the massive assembly hall. The structure was home to over 40,000 beings at any given time. Permanent residents, diplomats, workers, visitors, if the core systems were failing. A deep rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. Several beings nearby cried out in alarm. The lights flickered once, twice, then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a sickly yellow glow. "We need to get to our ship," Amy said. Her voice was steady, but David could see the fear in her eyes. "David, we need to go now." He watched the chaos unfolding around them. The AVIX delegates were pushing through the crowd with their wings spread, knocking smaller beings aside. A group of the elderly wisdom keepers, a species known for their philosophical contributions to the assembly, stood confused and frightened near a blocked corridor. No one was helping them. Through a viewport, David could see ships beginning to undock from the station's exterior. Everyone was running. Everyone was trying to save themselves. "Sir," Commander Nash's voice held a question. David made a decision that would change everything. "Nash, can you access the station's systems from here?" The commander's eyes widened slightly. "Probably, but we'd need authorization codes. We're not assembly personnel." "But you can see what's happening, the technical readouts." "Yes, sir, it's bad. The main reactor is stable, but the distribution network is failing. Environmental controls, life support, structural integrity fields, everything runs through the central core, and something has corrupted the primary control systems. Their automated safety protocols are making it worse, trying to shut down damaged sections, but creating cascade failures in adjacent areas." Amy understood first. "David, no, we can't. We don't have time, we don't have authority, and in case you forgot, they just told us to come back in 500 years. 40,000 people are on this station," David said quietly. "Beings, not people, and they're not our responsibility." He looked at her, really looked at her. Amy Walsh had been his friend for 15 years. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it meant leaving Earth for months. She was brave and compassionate, and right now she was terrified. "You're right," he said. "They're not our responsibility. We should leave." Relief flooded her face for just a moment before she saw his expression. "But you're not going to, are you?" "Nash, contact the Chancellor's office. Tell them we have personnel trained in disaster response and we're offering assistance." The commander didn't hesitate. He began working his communicator immediately. David had chosen his team well. Through the chaos, David could see High Chancellor Brentock on an elevated platform, trying to coordinate the response. Council members surrounded him, all talking at once. Several were clearly demanding priority evacuation for themselves and their staff. Nash lowered his communicator. "Sir, I got through to the Chancellor's aide," he said, and I quote, "Why would we need help from humans?" Then he cut the channel. Another rumble, stronger this time. A section of wall paneling fell from the ceiling, crashing down 20 meters away. The screaming intensified. David pulled out his own communicator and did something desperate. He broadcast on the Chancellor's emergency frequency. It was a breach of protocol that could get him arrested, but that didn't seem to matter much anymore. "Chancellor Brentock, this is David Reeves of Earth's diplomatic mission. We have personnel trained in crisis management and system repair. We're offering our assistance." For a long moment, nothing. Then the Chancellor's face appeared on the small screen, his reptilian features showing something David hadn't seen before: fear. "Human, your offer is noted but unnecessary. We have our own emergency teams responding." As if to contradict him, a series of explosions echoed from somewhere deep in the station. The floor tilted slightly before the gravity generators compensated. Somewhere, people were dying. "With respect, Chancellor, your emergency teams are trained for small-scale incidents. This is a cascading systems failure affecting the entire station. We study these scenarios extensively on Earth because our world doesn't forgive mistakes. Earthquakes, hurricanes, industrial accidents, we've learned how to respond when everything goes wrong at once." Brentock's eyes narrowed. Behind him, David could see Quindle pushing his way forward, clearly trying to demand something from the Chancellor. "What would you need?" Brentock asked. "Full access to your core systems, technical schematics, and 3 of your engineers who know this station's layout. We can stabilize the situation, but we need to act now." The Chancellor looked at something off-screen. His expression tightened. "Very well, access granted. My aide will provide the necessary codes and connect you with engineering staff, but human if this is some kind of—" "It's not," David said simply. "We're going to help." The connection cut. Within seconds, data began flooding Nash's scanner as the station's systems opened up to them. The commander whistled low. "Sir, this is worse than I thought. We're looking at total environmental collapse in maybe 45 minutes, maybe less." David looked at Amy. "You should get to the ship." She rolled her eyes. And miss watching you try to save the people who laughed at us. Not a chance. Besides, you'll need a xenobiologist to understand their life support requirements. Different species need different atmospheric mixtures. Thank you, David said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We haven't actually saved anyone. Commander Nash was already moving toward a systems terminal. Then we better get started. Around them, the chaos continued. But in the center of that chaos, 3 humans began to work. Commander Nash connected his scanner directly to the station's main terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the display faster than David could read. 3 Quellan engineers appeared beside them, their 4 arms moving nervously. The lead engineer, whose name translated as something close to Bright River, looked skeptical. The central core is fully automated, Bright River explained. We cannot simply override the safety protocols. They exist to protect the station. Your safety protocols are killing the station, Nash said without looking up. Look at Sector 7. The system detected a coolant leak and sealed off the area, but it didn't reroute the coolant flow, so now Sectors 8 and 9 are overheating. The automated response just sealed those 2. You're creating dead zones that are spreading outward like a disease. Amy had found a secondary terminal and was pulling up atmospheric data. David, we have 17 different species on this station with incompatible atmosphere requirements. The methane breathers in the lower levels, the high-pressure dwellers in Section 12, they're all dependent on precisely calibrated environmental systems. Can we stabilize each section individually? David asked. Not fast enough. The core manages everything. If it goes down completely, every system fails simultaneously. Nash's face was tight with concentration. We need to isolate the corrupted subsystems and run everything else on manual override. Bright River's translator made a sound of distress. Manual override of a station this size would require hundreds of operators. We don't have. We don't need hundreds, Nash interrupted. We need 3 people who understand crisis response and aren't afraid to break your precious protocols. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. Emergency bulkheads began slamming down across major corridors, automatically sealing off damaged sections. Unfortunately, they were also sealing in people who needed to evacuate. David grabbed his communicator. Chancellor, we need to stop the automated bulkhead closures. They're trapping people. Brentock's face appeared, scales dark with stress. If we open those bulkheads, we risk hull breaches spreading to undamaged sections. The bulkheads are sealing based on proximity alerts, not actual damage assessment, Amy cut in. She had pulled up a station map. Look at Section 15. It's perfectly intact, but the system sealed it because the adjacent section lost pressure. There are 200 beings trapped in there with no evacuation route. The Chancellor looked at something off-screen, then back at them. Do what you need to do. Nash's fingers flew across the terminal. Going to manual override of bulkhead controls. Amy, I need you to monitor atmospheric pressure in each section. If we open the wrong door, we could decompress a habitat. On it. David coordinated between them, relaying information to the Chancellor's emergency teams. It was like conducting an orchestra where every musician was playing a different song and the building was on fire. His crisis negotiation training kicked in. Stay calm, prioritize, break impossible problems into manageable pieces. Nash Sector 7's coolant leak. Can we route around it? Working on it. The system doesn't want to let me. It keeps trying to reassert automatic control. The commander's jaw clenched. Screw it. I'm shutting down the automation entirely for that sector. Bright River made a sound of horror. You can't do that. Without automated control, the reactor could. The reactor is fine. It's your automated systems that are the problem. They're designed for minor emergencies, not cascading failures. Sometimes the best response is to let humans make decisions instead of letting computers follow broken logic. Amy called out, I've got pressure stabilizing in Sector 15. Opening bulkheads there now. Emergency teams can start evacuations. Through the viewport, David could see the chaos beginning to organize. Ships were still leaving, but more slowly now. Emergency teams were reaching trapped sections. The immediate panic was giving way to coordinated response. Core temperature rising in the central hub, Nash announced. That's our main problem. Whatever corrupted the system originated there, and it's creating a feedback loop. The core is overheating, which makes the systems respond incorrectly, which makes it overheat more. David looked at the schematics. Can we manually shut down the core and restart it? Not without losing life support across the entire station for at least 10 minutes. We'd kill everyone. Amy frowned at her terminal. Wait, Nash, what if we don't shut down the core? What if we just isolate it? Run life support through the backup systems while the core resets itself. The backup systems can't handle the full load. They don't have to. We reduce power consumption everywhere else. Non-essential systems, lighting, recreational facilities, everything that isn't life support or structural integrity. Nash considered this. His fingers moved across the display, running calculations. It could work. We'd be running at maybe 60% capacity, and if anything else goes wrong during the reset. Then we deal with it, David said. Do it. The next 5 minutes were the longest of David's life. Nash shut down systems across the station, plunging whole sectors into darkness. Amy rerouted life support through the aging backup network, manually balancing atmospheric requirements for species David had never heard of. David coordinated with emergency teams, directing them to priority areas, keeping the Chancellor informed. The core temperature began to drop. It's working, Nash breathed. The feedback loop is breaking, core temperature falling to normal ranges. Life support holding steady on backup systems, Amy confirmed. All critical habitats maintaining atmosphere. Bright River and the other Quellan engineers stared at their terminals in disbelief. One of them said something that didn't translate, but the tone was clear enough. Astonishment. The emergency klaxons cut off. The sudden silence felt deafening after the constant wail. Normal lighting began returning section by section as Nash brought systems back online. David's communicator buzzed. The Chancellor's face appeared, and for the first time since the crisis began, Brentock's expression held something other than fear or stress. Status report, he said simply. Core systems stabilized, Chancellor. Backup life support is handling the load while we run diagnostics on the primary systems. No casualties reported from environmental failures. We're implementing a clean restart of the central core now, which should take approximately 15 minutes. Brentock was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, David could see council members gathering. He recognized several of them. They had been laughing less than an hour ago. The Assembly owes you a debt, David Reeves of Earth. David shook his head. No debt, Chancellor, just neighbors helping neighbors. The connection ended. Nash leaned back from his terminal, exhausted. Amy sat down hard on the floor, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Neighbors, Nash repeated with a tired smile. I like that. David looked around at the slowly calming station. Through the viewport, he could see ships beginning to return to their docks. The crisis was over. They had saved 40,000 beings who had dismissed humanity as irrelevant children. Now came the harder part, figuring out what happened next. 6 hours after the crisis ended, David stood in the same preparation chamber where this had all started. His uniform was ruined, stained with hydraulic fluid and coolant. His hands were scraped and bruised from manually opening a jammed access panel to reach critical systems. He felt like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, Amy was reviewing casualty reports with a grim expression. 19 dead, mostly from the initial explosions in the lower engineering sections. If we'd been 5 minutes slower, that number would have been in the thousands. Commander Nash had hardly left the engineering terminals. Even now, he was working with Bright River and the other Quellan engineers to make sure every system was properly stabilized. The lead Quellan engineer had stopped questioning Nash's methods around the 3rd hour of the crisis. Now they worked together like they'd been colleagues for years. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. David activated his communicator and the Chancellor's aide appeared. His expression was carefully neutral. "The Council has reconvened. Your presence is requested in the Assembly Hall." Not required, requested. David noted the change in language. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. He cleaned up as best he could, but there wasn't much to be done about the stained uniform. Amy changed into a spare outfit from their ship, and Nash refused to change at all. "They can see me as I am," the commander said firmly. "We just spent 6 hours saving their lives. I'm not putting on dress uniform like we're asking permission to exist." The assembly hall was different now, quieter. The thousands of beings who had filled it before were mostly gone, evacuated during the crisis. Only the council members and essential personnel remained. The vast space felt hollow, their footsteps echoing as they walked to the central platform. The platform rose, and David found himself facing the council again. High Chancellor Brentock sat in his elevated seat, his bronze scales gleaming under the restored lighting. The other council members were arranged on either side. David's eyes found Quindle. The Avix ambassador was not laughing now. "David Reeves of Earth," Brentock's voice carried through the hall. "On behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I formally acknowledge the actions of your team during today's emergency. Your intervention prevented catastrophic loss of life and saved this station from total systems collapse." David nodded. "We did what anyone would have done, Chancellor." A new voice spoke up. It came from a being David hadn't paid much attention to during the initial presentation. Merchant Lord Tulver of the Hive clans, an insectoid species known for their trading networks and practical wisdom. His compound eyes reflected the light as he leaned forward. "What anyone would have done," Tulver repeated, his translator giving his words a buzzing quality. "Perhaps, but what no one else did. I watched David Reeves. I watched as our own emergency team stood frozen, overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis. I watched as council members demanded priority evacuation while civilians were trapped in sealed sections. I watched as our automated systems, our pride and proof of our advanced civilization, failed us completely." He gestured with 2 of his 6 arms. "And I watched 3 humans from a species we had just rejected as too primitive for membership step forward without hesitation and do what none of us could." Silence filled the hall. David could hear his own breathing. Another council member spoke. This one was from the Wisdom Keepers, an elderly being whose species was known for living over 500 years. "Your Commander Nash disabled our safety protocols. He manually overrode systems that took our finest engineers decades to develop. By our laws and regulations, such actions could be considered sabotage." Nash's jaw tightened, but David spoke before he could. "Commander Nash saved lives. If following your regulations meant watching people die, then yes, he broke your regulations, and he'd do it again." "That's precisely my point," the Wisdom Keeper said. His tone wasn't angry. If anything, it sounded contemplative. "Our protocols, our automated systems, our carefully constructed regulations, we built them over centuries to create order and safety. But when faced with true chaos, they became chains that bound us. Your species, young and unrefined by our standards, understood something we had forgotten. Sometimes survival requires abandoning the rules and trusting intelligent beings to make decisions." Amy cleared her throat. "If I may, Counselor, it's not about abandoning rules. It's about understanding when rules serve you and when you serve the rules. On Earth, we face natural disasters regularly: earthquakes, floods, storms, wildfires. Our world doesn't follow protocols or respect automated responses. We've learned to adapt, improvise, and make hard choices under pressure because our survival has always depended on it." She paused, then added quietly, "Maybe that's what being a young species means. We're still close enough to the edge of survival that we remember how to fight for it." Quindle rose from his seat. The hall went even quieter. David watched the Avix ambassador walk down from his tier until he stood at the same level as the platform. His brilliant plumage seemed dimmed somehow, or maybe it was just the contrast with his subdued posture. "I owe you an apology," Quindle said. The words clearly cost him. "I owe all of humanity an apology. I mocked you for your conflicts, your brief unity, your limited technology. I called you children playing at being adults." He spread his wings slightly, a gesture David's briefing materials had indicated was their equivalent of a bow. "I was wrong. You responded to this crisis with competence, courage, and compassion. You had every reason to leave us to our fate after how we treated you. Instead, you stayed and saved us. That is not the action of children. That is the action of beings who understand what civilization truly means." David didn't know what to say. He settled for, "Thank you, Ambassador." Brentok stood, and everyone's attention shifted to the Chancellor. "The Council has discussed Earth's application in light of recent events. Under Article 12 of our Charter, applications denied under normal circumstances may be reconsidered under exceptional protocols when the applying species demonstrates extraordinary value to the Assembly." He paused, his ancient eyes meeting David's. "David Reeves, by unanimous vote of this Council, Earth's application for membership is approved. We would be honored to welcome humanity into the Galactic Assembly." The words hung in the air, approved, unanimous, everything they had come here hoping for offered freely now. David took a breath and said something that shocked everyone in the hall. "No." The single word echoed through the assembly hall like a gunshot. Council members leaned forward in their seats. High Chancellor Brentok's expression shifted from formal dignity to complete bewilderment. "No," the Chancellor repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. David felt Amy's hand grip. His arm tightly. Commander Nash remained perfectly still beside him. This wasn't something they had discussed, but David knew it was right. He had known it the moment Brentok made the offer. "With respect, Chancellor, I must decline Earth's membership at this time." Quindle's wings flared. "You saved our lives and now refuse the very thing you came here seeking. I don't understand." "Let me explain," David said. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of as many council members as he could. 12 hours ago, we stood on this platform and presented our case for membership. We offered everything we had, everything we are, and you rejected us. Not because we were unqualified, not because our application had errors. You rejected us because you found us amusing, primitive, beneath you." His voice remained calm, but the words carried weight. "When Ambassador Quindle laughed at our wars and our short history, others joined in. It became entertainment, a spectacle. We weren't potential partners, we were a joke to be dismissed and forgotten." Tulver chittered softly. "And now we offer membership out of gratitude. You believe we haven't truly changed our minds about your worth." "Exactly," David nodded at the Merchant Lord. "This isn't about gratitude or debt. If humanity joins the Assembly, it needs to be because we're genuinely valued as equals, not because we happen to be useful during a crisis. Today we had specialized skills that matched a specific emergency. Tomorrow you might face a different crisis where those skills are useless. Would you still want us then?" Amy found her voice. "We're not saying the Council is being dishonest. We know the gratitude is real. But membership granted out of obligation isn't the same as membership granted out of respect." Brentok descended from his seat, something David understood was highly unusual. The Chancellor walked closer to the platform, his towering form casting a shadow. But his expression wasn't angry, it was thoughtful. "You believe we haven't truly reconsidered our position," the Chancellor said slowly. "That we're simply paying a debt." "I think some members of the Council have genuinely changed their minds about humanity," David replied. "I believe Ambassador Quindle's apology was sincere. I believe Merchant Lord Tulver sees value in what we bring, but institutional change doesn't happen in a few hours. Cultural attitudes don't shift because of a single event." He gestured at the empty tiers around them. "Most of the Assembly wasn't here to see what happened today. They weren't here to watch Commander Nash improvise solutions that saved thousands of lives. They weren't here to see Dr. Walsh balance atmospheric requirements for species she'd only read about in books. They only know what they'll be told in reports and news broadcasts, and reports can be forgotten." The Wisdom Keeper spoke again. So you would refuse membership to make a point, to teach us a lesson about prejudice? No, David said firmly. We refuse because we believe the Assembly deserves better than members who joined under circumstances like these, and humanity deserves better than to be forever known as the species that was pitied into membership. Nash added quietly, we want to sit in this hall as equals, not as the charity case, not as the species everyone remembers laughing at before circumstances changed, just as equals. Silence again, then Quindle laughed. But this time it wasn't mocking. It sounded genuine, almost delighted. You refuse the very thing you traveled here to obtain, put your principles above your goals, and lecture the galaxy's most powerful governing body on self-respect. Humans are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Can't it be both? Amy muttered. Tulver rose and walked down to join Quindle. The two species were traditionally rivals, but they stood together now, looking at the humans. What do you propose instead? The Merchant Lord asked. David had been thinking about this during the long hours of the crisis. We return to Earth. We submit a new application through normal channels. The Assembly reviews it with fresh eyes, without the shadow of today's events influencing the decision. If you truly believe humanity has value, you'll approve us based on our merits. If not, then at least we'll know where we stand. And how long would this take? Brentok asked. Your standard review process is 1 year. We can wait that long. 1 year, the Chancellor repeated. You would wait another year, risk another rejection, just to ensure membership is granted for the right reasons. Yes. The Council members looked at each other. David could see private conversations happening through gesture and body language he didn't fully understand. Finally, Brentok turned back to him. Your refusal is noted, and I must admit. Respected, very well, David Reeves. Return to Earth. Submit your application through proper channels. The Assembly will review it fairly and thoroughly. He paused, then added something unexpected. Though I suspect the outcome will be the same. Then we'll have earned it properly, David said. Quindle stepped forward. Before you leave, allow me to say something, not as a council member, but personally. He looked at David, and the mockery that had been in his eyes before was completely gone. I have lived for 340 years. I have seen thousands of species make their case for membership. Many were qualified, some were exceptional, but in all that time I have never seen a species turn down approval. He folded his wings in what David now recognized as a gesture of deep respect. Your integrity is noted. When you return next year, I will vote in favor of your membership. Not out of gratitude, though I am grateful. Not out of obligation, though I am obligated. But because any species wise enough to refuse power for principle is exactly the kind of species we need in the Assembly. Other council members voiced agreement. The Wisdom Keeper stood and bowed. Tulver's compound eyes seemed to shine brighter. Even the council members who had remained silent throughout nodded their acknowledgement. Brentok extended his clawed hand in the human gesture of respect they had taught him. David shook it, feeling the strength in those ancient fingers. Safe travels, David Reeves of Earth. We will see you again in 1 year. The platform lowered. As they walked toward the exit, David heard Merchant Lord Tulver say to Quindle, I believe I underestimated them more than you did. We all did, the Avix ambassador replied softly. We all did. 12 months had passed since David walked away from guaranteed membership. Earth had spent that year preparing, not just documenting achievements, but truly examining what they wanted to contribute to the galaxy. The new application was 3 times longer than the first, filled not with boasts, but with honest assessments of human capabilities and limitations. David stood in the same preparation chamber, but everything felt different now. The tie didn't feel strange anymore. He had worn it to dozens of diplomatic functions across Earth as word of what happened spread. Humanity had become famous not for saving the Assembly, but for walking away from easy. Victory! Amy checked her tablet one final time. She had spent the year teaching xenobiology courses and consulting with Earth's expanded space program. The confidence in her bearing showed that growth. Nash had been promoted to head of the new Crisis Response Division, training teams specifically for emergency scenarios in space. He stood by the doorway in his uniform, but the medal on his chest was new, awarded by his own government for actions that had made humanity proud. "Ready?" Amy asked. David nodded. "Let's finish what we started." The assembly hall was completely full this time, every tier packed with beings from across the galaxy. David noticed immediately that the composition of the crowd had changed. Mixed in with the traditional members were representatives he didn't recognize, younger species, developing civilizations. The gallery that had been nearly empty last year now overflowed. The platform rose, and David found himself facing the council again. Brentok looked the same, ageless and imposing, but the Chancellor's eyes held something new when he looked at the human delegation. Respect, yes, but also something that might have been anticipation. "The Assembly recognizes Earth's representative," Brentok announced. "You may present your revised application for membership." David had prepared a speech, 30 pages of careful diplomacy, acknowledgement of Earth's growth, statistics about their expanding capabilities. He looked down at the tablet in his hand, then set it aside. "Chancellor, Council members, representatives of the Assembly. 1 year ago, I stood here and told you about humanity's achievements. Today, I want to tell you something simpler. We want to join the Assembly not because we think we're perfect, but because we know we're not. We want to learn from species that have navigated the challenges we're just beginning to face. We want to contribute what we know about surviving when things go wrong. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves." He paused, looking around the hall. "But more than anything, we want to prove that membership in this assembly isn't about how long you've been civilized or how advanced your technology is. It's about being willing to show up, do the work, and help when help is needed. That's what we offer. That's what we are." Quindle stood immediately. The Avix ambassador had visited Earth 3 times during the year, ostensibly for diplomatic purposes, but really, David suspected, out of genuine curiosity about humanity. "The Council has reviewed Earth's application thoroughly. We have examined your achievements, your capabilities, and your character. I move that we vote on membership immediately." "Seconded," Tulver added. The Merchant Lord had become an unexpected advocate for humanity, citing their practical approach to problem-solving as exactly what the Assembly needed. Brentok nodded. "The Council will vote, all in favor of granting Earth full membership in the Galactic Assembly." Every council member stood, every single one. David felt his chest tighten. "The motion passes unanimously," Brentok declared. "David Reeves, on behalf of humanity and your world of Earth, I welcome you as the newest member of the Galactic Assembly." This time, David didn't refuse. "On behalf of humanity, I accept with honor and gratitude." The hall erupted in sound, not laughter this time. Applause, cheers, welcoming calls in dozens of languages. David saw beings he didn't recognize standing and celebrating as if humanity's acceptance was their own victory. As the noise slowly died down, Brentok gestured for attention. "There is something else this council must address. Over the past year, 12 species have submitted applications for membership. Species that had previously considered themselves too young, too primitive, or too insignificant to apply. They cited humanity's example as their inspiration." The Chancellor looked directly at David. "You asked us last year if we would value humanity in crises beyond the one we faced. You questioned whether institutional change could happen quickly. I believe the past year has answered both questions. The Assembly has not just accepted humanity. We have learned from you. We have begun questioning our own assumptions about what makes a civilization worthy of membership." Merchant Lord Tulver spoke up. 4 of those 12 species have been granted provisional membership status pending full review. 3 more will likely be approved next quarter. Humanity didn't just join the Assembly. You changed it. David hadn't known about this. He looked at Amy, who seemed equally surprised. Nash was trying and failing to hide a smile. Quindle walked down from his tier again. "I told you when you left that I had never seen a species refuse membership. I also told you that I would vote for you based on." Principle, not gratitude. I kept that promise. But I want you to know that my vote today was the easiest I have ever cast in 340 years. Welcome, friends." He extended his wing in the gesture of respect his species used for equals. Over the following hours, David met representatives from dozens of species. Some he recognized, many he didn't. But what struck him most were the ones from the developing civilizations, the young species who had watched humanity's journey and seen possibility in it. A small being from a water-based species approached him during a reception. Through translation, she explained that her people had been observing the assembly for 200 years, but never believed they would be accepted. "You showed us that being young doesn't mean being less. That having challenges doesn't make us unworthy. Our application is being reviewed next month." David knelt to be at her eye level. "I hope you're accepted. The galaxy needs different perspectives, different experiences. That's what makes the assembly strong." As the celebration continued, David found a quiet moment by one of the viewports. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue marble suspended in the darkness. Home, the world that had taught humanity to survive against odds, to adapt when systems failed, to help even when help wasn't convenient. Nash joined him at the window. "Thinking about something profound, sir." "Actually, I was thinking about how none of this would have happened if their systems hadn't failed. We got lucky." "No," Nash said firmly. "Luck was being here when the crisis happened. Everything after that was who we are." Amy arrived with 2 drinks from the reception. "The Wisdom Keeper wants to talk to you about establishing an exchange program. Earth teachers on their worlds, their philosophers on ours. Also, 3 different species want to study our disaster response training." David took the offered drink. "Guess we're really doing this." "Guess we are." Through the viewport, other ships were arriving at the assembly station. More applicants, more young species finding courage to present themselves. The galaxy was changing, opening up, becoming more than it had been. And somewhere in that vast expanse of stars, a young species from a harsh world had shown everyone that strength came in many forms,